Does Saul Goodman say you have rights? I sure hope he does. I don't know that quote. Hi, I'm Elsie, and I'm never doing that intro again. It's exclusive. It's the opposite of the extra greeting Curtis Connor gives you every video. Speaking of videos, here's mine. Last year, CW came out with teasers for their new Powerpuff Girls series. Basically a complete ripoff of the Umbrella Academy, where the girls are all disillusioned with crime fighting. What they failed to pull off was, aside from literally everything, was their motives. Professor Utonium in the show was only known to be a loving father, unlike Reginald Hargreaves from Umbrella Academy. And the girls fought crime because they wanted to, so I failed to see why they're so messed up now. The only one I can see being sort of messed up, in quotation marks, is Blossom. So today I'm going to be rewriting the Powerpuff Girls as adults before it even comes out. Disclaimer, I'm going to be making their skin all the same tone as Bliss's skin tone for reasons that I'll expand on later. If you don't know, Bliss was the 4th Powerpuff Girl who was revealed to be a prototype in the reboot. I started with Bubbles because I had the idea for her outfit first. I didn't like how the adaptation turned her into this fame-hungry person. I actually imagined her as a woman who lives outside the city in the countryside with a small house. She doesn't hate attention or anything. She's still a very nice person, but she definitely doesn't go around crime fighting. The dress and the hat made her look more mature. I also wanted to avoid putting her in something that a teenager might wear, and I wanted to make her feel like an actual adult. Originally, I was going to have her be married, but as I thought up the story, it actually felt like it was going to hold her down. Also, I was having a lot of trouble with the eyes for some reason. In the original Powerpuff Girls, they were said to have bug eyes, but obviously, big eyes don't really translate well in cartoon styles because we all draw eyes pretty big anyways. I gave her what's basically the strawberry dress that got popular for some reason a year ago, but in blue. But I ended up giving her a sort of pineapple dress instead. It was gonna be a blueberry dress, but then I figured that blueberries don't really work on blue dresses. I also gave her these boots, because I thought they looked really good with her countryside sort of aesthetic. In terms of the story, these days she only uses her powers for things such as trips between the city and the country and to talk to animals, which is actually her established unique ability. And maybe to, heat up food or something small like that, I don't know. In terms of fighting, she's definitely lacking in practice nowadays, but it doesn't really matter to her since, before the story, Townsville would have seen a definite decrease in crime. Next, I did Buttercup. In my version, personality-wise, Buttercup is not as mean as she used to be. She's actually just a nice person. I imagine her as a Ruby Rose type figure, someone who looks intimidating but is actually really kind and charismatic.
How many tattoos do you have?
You know, if I was to count them individually each time I got them, maybe 60.
She definitely goes on a lot of talk shows. Not about being a Powerpuff Girl, but about some kind of sports that she does. I don't know what sports she'd play, but definitely one of them, to be sure. I also feel like her personality would sort of be like Robin Buckley's from Stranger Things, mainly in the first season that she appeared. She was a lot tougher then, but now that we've actually gotten to know her, Robin's actually very anxious and has a lot of issues with talking when she's nervous.
My brain is moving faster than my mouth, or rather, my mouth is moving faster than my brain, and it's like I'm digging this hole for myself, and I want to stop digging, and I'm trying to stop digging, but I can't, and I'm doing it right now.
In terms of powers, I think Buttercup would actually not use them at all. I think she'd use a motorcycle and a fancy sports car, and that she'd actually only use her human abilities for sports so that she'd be even with everyone else. I feel like most people would expect her to continue fighting crime, but I can see her like being a better person who enjoys competitions and TV shows. In fact, her not being able to fly or use her powers comes into my rewrite later. Blossom is the one I had the fewest ideas for. I didn't know what she'd be doing or what she'd wear. The original idea was that Buttercup would be the one hanging on to superheroism and that Blossom would have moved on to something like running for president or Congress or something. But then I thought it wouldn't be very interesting. So I thought if Buttercup is now a nice and chill person and Bubbles lives in the country, Blossom should be the one to hang on to her old reputation. So I wanted Blossom to lean into her old outfit the most. I didn't want it to look like the CW outfit, so I made it more mature. I gave Blossom this pink blazer with a black belt and gold buckle in the middle to mirror her old dress, but look fit for a woman. Also, I tried doing the same thing with large black boots because all the old Powerpuff Girls outfits were really comprised of were dresses and shoes. Also, where the other Utoniums no longer have their signature hairstyles, Blossom maintains the ponytail and bow thing. I imagine she's had that style for years and has never actually experimented. Personality-wise, Blossom hasn't changed much since her childhood. That is such a hard sentence to say for some reason. In the original Powerpuff Girls, The girls acted like adults really anyways, especially Blossom. They understood concepts that most elementary kids wouldn't, I think.
Why shouldn't you put a toaster in a bathtub full of water?
So I think even after the other Utoniums have moved on with their lives, Blossom kept training with her powers so that she'd never be out of practice in case something did happen. I still think she'd sort of be a control freak as well, thinking she's the leader of the Powerpuff Girls when the Powerpuff Girls is a term that's kind of dissolved over the years. Even the other sisters just call them the Utonium family. Lastly, and most controversially, is Bliss. Bliss was introduced in the Powerpuff Girls reboot, and it wasn't well received at all. One reason was because of her dark skin. It wasn't being dark-skinned that people were angry about, it was the implications that came with it. Bliss was said to be the imperfect Powerpuff Girl, basically. A prototype. And I'm sure this wasn't intentional, but making a brown girl the prototype to be improved upon by 3 white girls is definitely not something you accidentally want to imply. What they wanted to say was that Bliss was a prototype or imperfect because of her inability to control her powers and being very explosive, not her skin color. So this is why I've made all the sisters the same skin color, to show that Bliss was different because of her powers. My version of Bliss has mainly the same story in the beginning, but instead of her running away, I imagine her living somewhere secret and run by the government. So basically, she's never had real social interaction. And because of that, during the story she's extremely angered because she wasn't allowed to live freely while the other Utonium sisters were. And that's how she's set up to be the main antagonist of the story. I drew her with a symmetry modifier on because I wanted her to look more unnatural and intimidating than the others. It also fits since she was raised in a lab in my version. Also, I didn't like the whole thing of Bliss having blue hair. Not because the others had natural hair colors, but because blue was Bubbles' thing. And once again, not allowing a person of color to have a natural hair color is kind of a theme in media. So instead, I eventually went with this purplish brown color. In terms of the story, basically it'd be about Bliss escaping the government and hunting down Professor Utonium, and then finding out he created more superpowered children. I don't imagine that would be pleasant for anybody to find out, honestly. In the reboot of the Powerpuff Girls, Bliss just takes this information really well somehow. I don't know why she's so happy to be back. She also has this friend, which is revealed to be the villain him, who's been manipulating her this whole time. I think my story would go the same route, with her eventually coming around to her sisters and then him taking over as the main villain. Also, because I love fight scenes, I was drawing these little clips of fight scenes between the girls. Unfortunately, Buttercup's didn't translate very well, because earlier, if you remember, I decided Buttercup would have forgotten how to use her abilities, and so has to regain them through the story. This would make fight scenes between her and anyone in the beginning mostly her trying to dodge attacks. I also imagine the same thing for Bubbles, but only because Bubbles is more of a pacifist when she wants to be. Blossom, though, would have been training for this for years, so she's completely ready, and I still imagine her getting absolutely decked by Bliss regardless of her training. I also imagine Blossom's fighting style to be more up close. I even gave her ice swords because in the original Powerpuff Girls, Blossom's unique ability is Ice Breath. And that's also a bit funny because Buttercup doesn't actually have a unique ability in canon, which I think is a cool choice. I also drew these fight scenes to illustrate how much better a reboot would be if it was animated. A problem we see nowadays is things becoming live action as if they needed to be improved upon. Not every reboot needs to be live action, because live action things are usually less good looking. I personally cannot imagine 3 real adult women zooming around on camera without it looking extremely strange, whereas with animation you could make it look more natural. I don't know how to put this story into words very well because honestly I only have so much time for these videos, but still I think this whole thing would be a very interesting story and a better story than whatever CW has planned for their edgy rewrite. Not everything has to be edgy, and I don't like seeing the Powerpuff Girls as these angry, disillusioned women, sort of DC or Marvel style or whatever. Having colorful personalities is really important to any story, even adult ones. So that's been my rewrite and redesign of the Utonium sisters, or the Powerpuff Girls. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you didn't, then